Hey guys, tonight we drift not just into the past, but into the spine of time itself, into a world where the sky is a god's eye, the river is a living pulse, and the desert isn't empty, it's watching. You're in Egypt now, but not the Egypt of classroom maps and dusty documentaries. No, this is the Egypt behind the veil. The one with crocodiles sliding silently beneath black water. The one where jackals cry into the wind like old souls. The one that smells like myrrh, stone, sweat, and something half sweet, half sinister. You're not walking into history. You're walking into something that never left. You hear the Nile before you see it. It breathes. Literally, a soft rhythm, like lungs beneath the surface of the world. The reeds whisper against each other. The sand crunches underfoot. Overhead, the moon hangs low and heavy, silvering the water and pulling at something deep in your chest, something ancient. You pause, because something's chanting nearby. A priest, maybe, or something older. You can't see him, but you feel it. Those syllables rise and fall like tide, like smoke, like command. They aren't prayers, not exactly. They're reminders, to the gods, to the dead, to the sun itself. You walk forward. Your sandals scrape over gravel, rough with old offerings and discarded husks of things once sacred. You're not a tourist here. You're not even really a guest. You're a presence, a shadow with ears. This place doesn't see you, but it feels you, like a cat pretending not to notice you, but shifting its weight anyway. And just so you know, you probably won't survive this. Not because anything's going to jump out and curse you, but because this world doesn't need you. Not your language, not your passport, not your approval. This place will continue, with or without your understanding. Even gods die here. Even pyramids crumble. Even kings forget their names in the dark. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're watching from a distant corner of the world, drop your city and local time in the comments. Someone's always listening from somewhere else in the night. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Let your breath match the river and step softly into tonight's journey. You open your eyes. It's still dark. Not night anymore, but not quite dawn. That strange in-between hour when the stars start to slip away, but the sky hasn't decided what color it wants to be. Deep cobalt, a hint of violet, and something sharp in the air, like cool stone or expectation. You're on the riverbank. The Nile glides beside you, wide and black and impossibly quiet. Torchlight dances on the surface like fallen stars. Across the water, fishermen haul nets, slow, rhythmic movements, like they're part of some sacred choreography. The temple behind you exhales, not literally, but you hear it anyway. A low stone groan, the sound of columns remembering. You turn. The entrance looms, massive, shadowed, and crowned with hieroglyphs glowing faintly in the moon's breath. The doorway is flanked by statues of the gods, hawk-headed, jackal-faced, serene and terrifying in equal measure. You step inside. The floor is limestone, cold and smooth. You can feel its history underfoot, centuries of priests, prisoners, kings, and servants crossing the same threshold. The air smells of crushed herbs, oil, and fire, and time, thick, unmoving time. A boy runs past. He's no older than 10. Barefoot, smudged with ash. In his arms, a bundle of reeds and blue lotus. He doesn't look at you. He's moving fast, toward the sanctum, where stone gods sleep and wait to be awakened. Because here's the thing. In Egypt, the supernatural isn't dramatic. It's routine. The gods have schedules. Every morning, priests enter with cloth and chant, wiping the sleep from the eyes of statues. They bathe them, feed them bread and beer, anoint them with scented oil. It's not ceremony, it's obligation, a divine checklist. You hear a bell, not metaphorical, a real one, sharp, clear, echoing through the temple halls like a ripple across water. Time to move. You step into the outer courtyard. People are already gathering. Merchants roll out linen stalls, displaying amulets, fish, carved charms, and dried figs. A scribe dips his reed into ink made from soot and Nile silt. A woman kneels at a tiny shrine, offering milk and beer, not for her children, but for her ancestors. The dead eat well here. The sun edges up behind the horizon, a sliver of gold slicing through the violet sky. And that's when you feel it. Egypt changes. Something in the air shifts. The market hushes, heads turn. You don't hear it, you sense it, like pressure, like reverence, a shout. From the north gate, soldiers march in, synchronized, precise, spears upright, sand curling around their sandals. Then comes the chariot, golden, silent, floating somehow. And on it, the Pharaoh. He's not what you expected, not old, not distant, young, no older than 30, skin sun-warmed, eyes like obsidian. He doesn't wave, doesn't blink. His posture is perfect, as if the spine of the nation runs through his own. You don't bow. You're not of this world. You just watch. And he doesn't seem to mind. A child approaches him, barely 5, hands trembling, holding a lotus flower. The Pharaoh bends, takes the bloom, places it onto a brazier. It hisses. The gods accept. Then the doors open. Temple doors you hadn't even noticed before. They part like mountain stone. The Pharaoh disappears inside. The crowd parts. You follow. The walls here are alive. Painted scenes swirl around you. Hawks eating hearts, crocodiles judging souls, lotuses blooming from the mouths of the dead. One scene in particular catches your eye. A golden boat sailing across the sky. Ra's journey. The sun's daily battle. And that's when it hits you. This isn't ancient. It's eternal. And you're not here to observe. You're here to remember. And your journey is just beginning. You blink slowly, and when your eyes open again, you're no longer just a drifting guest. You are inside the ritual machine now, caught in its gears. The temple behind you hums with incense and preparation. But the real heartbeat of Egypt doesn't echo in its stone walls. It walks. It breathes. And it wears the face of the Pharaoh. You don't walk beside him. You wouldn't dare. But you hover close enough to feel the gravity that clings to him like gold dust. The air tightens as he moves through the halls. His linen robes whisper. His sandals never scuff. Servants scatter before him like birds. No one dares to look him directly in the eyes unless they want to risk being turned into stone or reassigned to a quarry 2 deserts away. He enters a room lit only by polished copper mirrors. Priests swarm him, like bees but quieter, undressing, anointing, dressing again. You notice they layer his body in oils, resins, and scents so rich, it's as if the gods themselves want to eat him. Then comes the collar, wide, jeweled, heavy. Then the kohl. Yes, eyeliner, because the divine must always be beautiful, even at war, even when dying. You smirk at the thought, but don't say it aloud. You're still technically inside a sacred hallucination. And finally, the crown. Not 1, but 2. Upper Egypt, Lower Egypt, worn together. It's not just fashion. It's politics made visible. And the weirdest part? You realize he doesn't choose any of it. He just is. A god in skin. The country wears him like a mask. He steps forward to a platform. The sun has risen higher now, and the temple's inner courtyard fills with light. Everything is designed for this exact angle. The moment his sandals touch the dais, the sun lands square on his crown. Everyone gasps, not because it's new, but because it always works. Sacred geometry has no off days. You watch a noblewoman faint. The crowd ripples. A priest chants something about Ra and the rebirth of order. And you? You're trying not to laugh at the fact that one of the guards just tripped over a peacock. Sacred bird, unfortunate timing. Still, the ritual goes on. He raises his hand. A hush drops like a sandstorm. And then he speaks, low, calm, rehearsed. It's not a speech. It's more like invocation. Every syllable declares that chaos has been vanquished for one more day. Crops will grow. Trade routes will stay open. No crocodiles in the baths. You're welcome, citizens. The crowd cheers like they've just seen the Beatles, if the Beatles controlled flood levels and wheat supply. And just like that, he turns and disappears again. No waves, no smiles, no human reaction at all. You follow. He enters a long hall with walls covered in scenes of warfare and conquest. But these aren't messy depictions. No blood, no chaos. Every enemy looks like they're waiting politely to be trampled. The pharaoh at the center? Always bigger than the rest. You get the feeling this wasn't how the battles actually looked. But when you're a god king, history isn't about truth. It's about choreography. The smell in here is heavier. Oils, wax, and something else. Papyrus, dust, maybe ego. He steps into the hall of audience. It's huge, cool, despite the desert outside. Hundreds of columns rise like a stone forest. Courtiers line the walls, waiting like statues to be noticed. Petitioners kneel, heads down, holding scrolls, gifts, or bribes, though no one says the last part out loud. This is where decisions happen. A farmer begs for more water rights. A merchant requests permission to sail upstream and marry a governor's niece. A general brings a problem no one wants: war on the border. The pharaoh listens. He doesn't speak right away. Instead, his scribe reads from a copper scroll. There's a quiet click every time the metal unfurls. You wonder how many decisions in history were made not with passion, but with pre-approved paperwork. Finally, he nods. One word, another nod, a gesture. That's it. He's not cold exactly. He's just trained, like a hawk, and maybe a little tired. You begin to notice things. His fingers twitch occasionally, as if bored. His foot moves subtly under the robe, tapping against the throne. His eyes flicker toward a mural on the wall, not the people. The mural shows the Nile at flood, fish jumping, birds flying, joy. He misses it, or fears it, or maybe he's just counting how many more hours of divinity he has to perform today. Because here's the thing, no one likes to say aloud. Being a god is exhausting. He has to embody prosperity, justice, fertility, victory, divine will, and local weather predictions, all at once. And if he stumbles, famine, revolt, the gods get moody. You think back to that boy earlier, the one who brought him the lotus, probably trained for months just to walk 10 steps without tripping. And still, he trembled. Not because the pharaoh is cruel, but because power warps distance. Even kindness feels like lightning from a far-off sky. Eventually, the court session ends. The last petitioner bows so low they nearly kiss the floor. The guards begin to clear the hall. The Pharaoh stands. This time, you don't follow him out. You pause, because as he leaves, you hear him murmur something, too quiet for the crowd to hear, but not for you. He says, "How long must I wear this crown?" Then he's gone, and you're left standing among empty marble and echoes. A fly buzzes near the throne. No one swats it. Outside, the sun climbs higher. The heat begins to rise. The gods are fed. The people are ruled. And somewhere, the river keeps flowing. You remain still in the hall of audience long after the courtiers vanish and the guards retreat into shadow. The scent of incense lingers, but now it's mixed with something raw: sweat, tension, and fear disguised as devotion. You can feel the weight of power still hanging in the air, like the static after a lightning strike. And yet, beneath it, something else hums. Whispers. You drift toward the rear corridors of the palace, where marble turns to sandstone, where polished statues give way to shadowed corners and softer voices. This is not the domain of ceremony. This is the backstage. And here, Egypt becomes mortal again. Two scribes lean close, barely speaking above a murmur. Did you hear what his sister said last night? She was at the moon altar. Again. The high priestess caught her with a Nubian servant. And the vizier's daughter. Pregnant, they say. But whose? Their eyes flicker toward the ceiling, toward the throne room above, toward danger. You glide past them unnoticed. You're not supposed to be here, but in this dream, you break rules as easily as sand breaks wind. The corridor narrows. A cat darts between your legs. It stares, tail high, as if it knows things you don't. Down a small flight of stone steps is a chamber you weren't meant to find. Inside, tapestries drape the walls, not of gods, but of family trees. Or knots, more like. Cousins marrying cousins, sisters marrying brothers, fathers marrying daughters, not out of desire, out of duty. You've entered the royal genealogy hall. There's a table covered in clay tablets and painted busts. Someone has arranged them to resemble a dinner party, but it looks more like a hostage situation. Their eyes, all the busts, seem to follow you, or perhaps judge you. You study the lineages. It's dizzying. One pharaoh had 12 wives, all within 2 degrees of relation. Another married his half-sister, then his daughter, then both. Historians still argue whether these unions were ceremonial or consummated, but either way, the results were sometimes disastrous. Mental illness, birth defects, paranoia, but also loyalty. No one outside the bloodline could ever betray the family, at least not without some effort. You pause at a familiar name. You know this one from museums, from textbooks. Akhenaten, the heretic, the one who changed everything for a little while. We'll get there. For now, you focus on the present, such as it is. A voice echoes down the corridor. Find the princess, now. Guards scramble. You float along behind them like a wind they can't feel. They rush to a garden cloister hidden inside the palace walls. It's shaded by palm fronds, ringed with lotus flowers floating in shallow pools. And in the center, on a marble bench, sits a girl, maybe 16. Sharp eyes, strong jaw, hair braided in coils down her back. She's the pharaoh's sister, and his wife. She lifts her gaze as they approach, not in fear, but boredom. "Why the rush?" she asks, yawning. "Did the sky fall?" A captain bows low. "You weren't at your devotions, High One?" "I was communing," she says, gesturing lazily toward the pond. "With the lilies." Silence. The guards don't move. She stands. Tell my husband I'll be ready when the gods are. Then she walks away, past them, through them, like she owns the air itself. And maybe she does. You follow her, unable to resist. She moves with purpose now, deeper into the palace's feminine quarters, where queens and sisters and mothers wield influence sharper than obsidian knives. In a private room lined with alabaster and cedar, another woman waits. Older, tired eyes, crowned with gold so delicate it looks like sunlight woven into thread. The Queen Mother, the true power. You're late, she says. Was admiring the fish, replies the princess, shrugging out of her cloak. They will admire your body when it's laid on the embalming table if you test your brother again. Oof, that landed. But the princess doesn't flinch. He needs opposition, or he forgets he's human. The queen nods slowly, and so he needs you. You watch their faces, mirror images, one younger, sharper, but both carved from the same royal stone. You realize something quietly terrifying. These women are not decorations in a king's life. They are the kingdom. Behind every divine pharaoh is a network of wives, sisters, daughters who scheme and sacrifice and survive. It's not about love. Not really. It's about control. Who marries whom? Who bears the air? Who whispers in the ear of a god? You pass through another chamber now, where young women play harps and apply scented oils to one another's skin. A servant lights a brazier that smells like cinnamon and myrrh. The scene is peaceful, almost gentle. And then one of them giggles, not playfully, but cruelly. She's reading a letter from a priest about a bastard child born in secret. Will they drown it? One girl asks. Only if it's lucky? Another replies. The harp plucks a soft note. Someone begins to hum. This isn't a palace, it's a hive. And beneath the honey, the stingers hum. You step back outside, into the sunlight, dizzy from the heat of all this invisible power. Above, a hawk circles the sky. Below, the king prepares for war. And somewhere between them, the sisters whisper like snakes in silk. You wake, or think you do, inside a chamber that smells like cedar oil and polished stone. The air is cool, despite the heat that thrums just outside the walls. No birds sing here. No breeze moves. It is as if the palace itself is holding its breath. A door creaks open. Time restarts. You're standing now behind the curtain of morning rituals. The pharaoh, still spotless in linen, has re-entered the inner sanctum. He's flanked by priests again. You'd think, after being worshipped as a living god, the man could sleep in. But no, he has a divine calendar to uphold. And let's be honest, even gods don't get personal days in Egypt. The chamber is arranged like a play. The priesthood has been blocking this scene for centuries. One adjusts a flame. One lifts a silver spoon. Another crumbles something green and slightly fuzzy into a golden bowl. Maybe mint. Maybe magic. You're not close enough to check the label. The high priest steps forward. Great One, Horus incarnate, son of the sun. We ask your blessing on the crops, on the people, on the sandals of the tax collectors. You almost chuckle. Sandals. Really? But yes, in Egypt, everything gets blessed, because everything must function perfectly, or else chaos, the enemy of Ma'at, will slither in, and nobody wants another year of frogs and rivers of blood. The pharaoh nods once. That's all it takes. His eyelids flicker, not in boredom, but in focus. You realize he knows this ritual by heart. Every line, every grain of incense, every note of the sistrum bell. He's performed it since childhood, maybe before he could spell his own name. It's not ceremony, it's survival. The ritual unfolds. Libations poured on sacred statues, oil rubbed into the arms of deities, gold leaf fluttering in the filtered sunlight. The gods are treated not as metaphors, but as actual entities. Hungry, moody, very real. And someone has to keep them happy. Guess who? Behind the altar, a young priest fumbles his grip on a vial. It slips, clinks softly. Doesn't break, but the sound echoes too loudly. The room freezes. The pharaoh's head tilts. Not sharply, not cruelly. Just precise. The priest's hands tremble. "Continue," the pharaoh says, his voice like linen soaked in river water. Soft, but heavy. The moment passes. But you catch something in the boy's eyes. Terror. Not of punishment, but of shame. Failing a god, even by accident, stains your soul. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians feared their gods or merely respected them obsessively. Either way, the result looks the same: absolute compliance. The ceremony winds down. Offerings are complete. The music softens. And now, the pharaoh must do something stranger than any invocation. He must go sit in a room and listen to people talk. You follow him into the hall of sacred council. No gold here, no perfume, just white walls and low chairs. The architecture forces people to sit lower than the pharaoh. Even the vizier must crane his neck like a sunflower. The vizier speaks first, all throat-clearing and polished phrases. Something about grain stores, river levels, a brewing dispute between camel merchants and fishermen. You watch the pharaoh's expression. Blank. Impassive. But his hands? They drum against his knee, just once. Almost a tick, or a signal. The scribe scribbles it down. You realize this entire meeting could have been an email, if emails were carved into limestone. Another official stands to speak. This one's younger, nervy, his beard a little too carefully shaped. He's here to ask for permission to open a new quarry. The pharaoh asks a single question: who profits? The room falls into a soft but noticeable silence. That's the trick with divine kingship. It's not about ruling. It's about reminding people they're being watched. You lean against a column as the meeting continues. These men play politics like a game of Senet. Every move requires calculation. Every compliment hides a plea. Every agreement is a gamble. You wonder what the pharaoh actually wants. He doesn't show emotion, but you catch him glancing just once out the window. The view is simple. The Nile, lazily winding past the palace gardens. Papyrus boats drifting like clouds on water. And you realize he's not thinking about war or taxes or petitions. He's thinking about the river, the one thing he can't control. A priest enters, bowing so low you worry he'll snap in half. Great one. The astrologers request your presence in the Tower of Sight. The pharaoh nods once, a subtle roll of his shoulders. He's been sitting too long. He stands, and you follow. The Tower of Sight is exactly what it sounds like. Tall, narrow, and filled with tools of starcraft. No telescopes, of course, just polished obsidian, bowls of oil, and charts drawn on crocodile skin. You overhear two stargazers whispering. The comet returns. Every 39 winters. Bad omen. Or change. Depends on the alignment. You've heard this before. Scholars today still debate whether Egyptian astronomy was science or superstition, but in this room, it doesn't matter. It's belief that matters. The pharaoh enters, and everyone bows like wheat in a storm. The chief astrologer presents a scroll with tonight's forecast. A lunar eclipse. Rare, ominous, sacred. The pharaoh reads it in silence, then says, "We will make an offering to the moon." And that's it. Not fear, not doubt, just adjustment. Ritual absorbs disruption like sand absorbs water. As the day slips toward dusk, you follow him once more, this time to his private quarters. Finally, behind the heavy cedar doors, the mask begins to crack. Not much, but enough. He sighs, takes off the collar, rubs the bridge of his nose, and when he thinks no one's watching, he closes his eyes and whispers, "Another day." Done. You stand beside him in the silence and wonder, how many more? Night slides in like a silk sheet soaked in ink. You're standing outside the palace again, where the city is slowing, cooling, folding in on itself. The stars begin to peek through, each one meticulously catalogued by priests who believe that destinies are not written in hearts, but in the sky. Behind you, the pharaoh rests, or rather, lies still. No true rest comes when your dreams belong to the gods. You wander through the outer sanctum, where servants begin the nightly cleansing. Jars of oil line the walls, each labeled in pictograms: lavender for calm, frankincense for clarity, and, this one's a surprise, crocodile dung. Yes, that's a thing. Mixed with honey, it becomes a fertility paste, possibly a contraceptive, possibly both. Historians still argue over that one. Egypt, it seems, wasn't afraid to experiment. A group of young women kneel in a circle, grinding pigments for the next day's cosmetics. Malachite, ochre, crushed beetle shells. The colors are dazzling even by firelight. One dabs a bit on her wrist to test the tone. The other whispers, "If she wears too much green, it means she wants his attention. If she wears too much black, she already has it." The girls giggle, but underneath, the calculation is clear. Makeup here isn't vanity, it's strategy. You move on, deeper, quieter. A door opens to the bathing hall, where another layer of ritual unfolds. The walls here are carved with fish and reeds and lotus flowers, all swirling in hypnotic patterns. Pools lie in perfect symmetry, warm from underground fires. The attendants undress the pharaoh's body not with shame, but reverence. They scrub with pumice, oil with myrrh. Not a patch of skin goes untouched. You're struck again by how deeply the divine must be maintained. Godhood here is high maintenance. The pharaoh doesn't speak. He lifts his arms as instructed, turns, lowers into the pool with the grace of a marble statue learning to breathe. You float nearby, observing. The water carries his reflection across the surface like a mirage. He watches it, carefully, like he's waiting for it to blink. And for a moment, just a flicker, you see it. Doubt. A crease at the edge of his brow. A breath held just a second too long. He's not looking at his reflection. He's asking it a question. Am I really still a god? Or just another man wearing makeup in old myths? Then it's gone. He rises. The towel arrives. The attendants bow and disappear like shadows. You follow him into the scenting chamber, where trays of unguents wait like a banquet. He selects one, lotus resin, and applies it himself, deliberately. You notice the order: first the neck, then the wrists, then the feet. Because even a god needs to smell nice in case of assassination. That's not a joke. Poison often enters through perfume here, or wine, or a brother's cup. The pharaoh steps into the wardrobe chamber. 2 robes await. One white, simple, clean. One golden, embroidered, stiff with jewels. He chooses the white one. You'd expect the gold. You almost want the gold. But he surprises you. And maybe himself. In this moment, he's not a god, not a king. He's a man trying to remember who he is before the crown. A quiet knock on the wall. Your sister is waiting. Of course she is. You follow him down the corridor that leads to the private garden, a moonlit space shielded by thick hedges and even thicker secrets. She's already there, reclining on a cushioned bench, draped in linen the color of dusk. Gold armbands curl around her biceps like snakes mid-whisper. "You're late?" she says, not unkindly. "I was bathing in crocodile dung," he replies, a faint smile. She tosses him a fig. He catches it mid-air. Their conversation is casual, intimate, but every line carries tension, like reeds bent over rushing water. They talk about the grain yield, the construction delays at the new temple, a dream she had where the moon swallowed the sun and her hands turned into ash. "That's just indigestion," he says. "Eat less goat." Another smile. But you can see it. He listens, really listens. With her, he doesn't perform. He breathes. Then she asks, "Will you name the boy your heir?" And the air thickens. "Which boy?" he replies. She doesn't blink. Exactly. You realize she's not asking for herself. She's asking for Egypt. The gods may demand offerings, but it's the bloodline that demands insurance. They sit in silence for a moment. Crickets hum. A breeze stirs the reeds. She speaks again, softer now. "We can't rule forever, but maybe we can choose who comes after." He nods finally. "I'll think about it." You believe him. And also, somehow, you don't. Because in this world, thought and action are separated by ritual, by advisors, by curses carved into limestone. Later, he returns to his chamber. The bed is raised, canopied, draped in linens dyed with crushed saffron and hematite. A servant smooths the pillow with practiced ease. He lies down, not with exhaustion, but with resignation. Tomorrow, the ritual begins again, and you'll be there, watching the god wake, watching the man disappear. The sky blushes violet as dawn approaches, and you find yourself where few are allowed, beneath the palace, in the bowels of the sacred compound. You descend with the first priests of the day, moving like mist through a tunnel carved from pure intention. Down here, stone doesn't echo, it absorbs. This is no prison, this is preparation. You emerge into a subterranean hall lit by flickering oil lamps and the faint gleam of polished gold. At first glance, it looks like a museum, if museums could pulse with breath. Shelves line the walls, not with scrolls or jewels, but with jars. Hundreds of them, each one labeled, each one sealed. Hearts, livers, brains, not fresh, not food. These are the preserved organs of the divine dead, carefully extracted, lovingly stored. A second life waiting. And beside them, cats, birds, snakes, baboons. Yes, baboons. They're not statues, not relics. They're mummified, dressed in bandages and beads, each wrapped like royalty, their faces painted with reverent care. A cat near your elbow wears a gold nose ring. A falcon rests atop a miniature throne. Welcome to the zoo of eternity. You trail behind a priest who walks barefoot and silent. He carries a dish of crushed lotus petals. Occasionally, he sprinkles them before the altars, not for aroma, for honor. He turns and whispers, not to you, but to a mummified ibis. "Guide our knowledge, great Thoth." The ibis does not reply, but it doesn't have to, because here in the crypt of sacred beasts, silence is conversation. You pass into another chamber, this one hotter, narrower, coated in soot. A fire burns low in the center. Above it, a slab. On the slab, a shape, human, but not breathing. The embalming priest works in rhythm. Cut, clean, dry, repeat. His tools are obsidian, his hands so steady they could be carved themselves. The dead man on the table isn't a pharaoh, just a noble. His wife stands behind a screen, crying in a very measured, socially acceptable way. Too loud, and she's dramatic. Too quiet, and she's suspicious. Beside her, a child holds a carved wooden shabti, an afterlife servant. He's been told this doll will carry messages to his father in the field of reeds. You linger as the priest removes the brain through the nose with a hook. You flinch, because of course you do. Everyone does. And then he mutters something in old tongue, a phrase you can't quite catch. Possibly, may his thoughts be untroubled. Possibly. Don't sneeze now. Historians still argue whether the hook was ceremonial or functional. Either way, the work continues. The body is filled with resin and linen, stitched with cords soaked in cedar oil. The priest paints protective glyphs on the bandages as he wraps, not because he's sentimental, because the dead forget things, and without reminders, the soul could get lost, wandering aimlessly instead of passing through the gates of judgment. You move to the next chamber. It's colder here, more orderly. This is where coffins are painted. A young artist kneels before a wooden sarcophagus, brush in hand, brow furrowed. His pigment tray gleams with colors drawn from every corner of the Nile Valley. Lapis for the sky, carnelian for blood, crushed turquoise for eternity. He paints the deceased with arms crossed and serene eyes, flanked by gods. There's no room for grief, only order. Mahat must be maintained, even in death. Especially in death, you pass shelves of funeral masks, some golden, some clay. One stares at you, its smile frozen in eternal calm. Another has been discarded, cracked, too imperfect for a noble face. You lean in. There are fingerprints inside the clay, probably from the craftsman. He's immortal now, unintentionally. You leave the embalming complex and follow another corridor. This one twisted and narrow. The walls are painted with scenes of the journey through the underworld. Monsters, scales, serpents with legs. The imagery is intense, almost psychedelic. Not horror, just instruction. This is the Book of the Dead, written not for drama, but for guidance. Turn left at the fire lake. Offer figs to the baboon-headed guardian. Avoid insulting the hippo demon, even accidentally. You emerge into a chamber shaped like a lotus flower. At the center is an altar, and above it, floating in dusty sunlight, a feather. Alone. Perfect. This is where hearts are weighed. Not today, of course. There are no souls present. But the ritual remains staged, waiting like a theater that never closes. You place your hand near the feather, unsure why. No judgment comes, but the air around you thickens, and for a moment, you feel like your own heart might leap out and confess. That's when the priest reappears. Time, he says simply. Time for what? He gestures upward. You climb back through the passageways, past the animals, past the coffins, past the echo of hooks and resin and stitched lips, up, until light spills through a narrow slit in the ceiling. You emerge on the palace roof, blinking. And there, standing like a statue reborn in flesh, he waits. The pharaoh, freshly perfumed, robed in linen, sandaled with gold. He stares across the city, toward the tombs. He is alive, but already preparing to be dead. Because in Egypt, you must plan your death while your hands still move. Tombs don't build themselves, and gods must lie beautifully. The sun is high now, bleaching the rooftops and steaming the Nile like a slow-boiled soup. You descend from the palace roof into another corridor, but this one smells different. Not of oil or resin, but of something softer: perfume, milk, and rose water. This is the inner wing, reserved for the royal women. And as you cross its threshold, you understand that while the Pharaoh might rule Egypt, it is here that the kingdom is remembered. The room you enter is blinding with light. Not from windows, those are shaded by intricate latticework, but from gold. Polished mirrors catch the sun and toss it across the walls like playful cats. Women lounge on cushions, some laughing, some arguing over board games you don't recognize. Others hum lullabies to babies cradled in lapis-studded baskets. But make no mistake, this is not leisure. This is strategy. Each woman here holds a thread in Egypt's future. Wives, concubines, sisters, cousins. Some are all three. You've stepped into the dynastic web, where love is tangled with duty, and bloodlines are guarded like treasure. At the center of it all sits the great wife, not necessarily the most beloved, just the most important. Her name is whispered more than spoken, but her presence is unmistakable. Regal posture, henna'd hands, a ring that bears the eye of Horus, glittering like a warning. She doesn't move when you approach, but her eyes find yours, sharp, curious. She watches us again. She murmurs. Someone replies. She always does. You pretend not to hear, but you do. Every word. A young woman enters the chamber, wrapped in sheer linen, her hands trembling just slightly. The room stills. She's been chosen. Someone whispers. Chosen for what? You follow her through another curtain. The space beyond is smaller, darker, scented heavily with myrrh and blue lotus. A midwife waits by a basin of warm water. The girl lies down. You realize she's pregnant, but not near birth, near ritual. A priestess marks her belly with red ochre. Another places a beetle amulet on her chest. This isn't just medical care, it's ceremony, because every child born of the royal line might be more than a baby, might be a god. You step back as the curtain falls. Behind it, muffled chants begin. You return to the main chamber, where two older women argue over genealogy. No, her mother was the half-sister of the previous vizier. Only through marriage, she wasn't of the direct line. Still counts. You realize they're not just chatting, they're rehearsing war. In Egypt, lineage isn't about affection. It's about legitimacy. One wrong cousin, one shady uncle, and the entire divine claim crumbles. You pause beside a girl, playing with a doll made of clay and thread. It wears a tiny crown. She sets it on a makeshift throne, then knocks it over with a small pebble. You glance at her. She shrugs. They always fall eventually. Yikes. Back in the main hall, another woman arrives, older, commanding, wrapped in black and gold like a living eclipse. She's not smiling. Has he chosen an heir? She asks. The great wife doesn't answer, but her eyes harden just a little. He's naming the boy tomorrow, another woman says. The one from the Western Queen. The tension is instant, like a sandstorm trapped in silk. She's Libyan, someone hisses. Barely understands our rights. She gave him a son. So did 3 others. You look around and realize this is the battlefield, not chariots, not spears, cradles. The politics of succession aren't played out in public. They unfold in whispered accusations, in calculated fertility, in strategic mourning. Someone weeps in the corner. Not loudly, just enough to be noticed. She's been passed over. Again. and everyone knows what that means. She may never bear the next god. Later that evening, a quiet ceremony unfolds in the moon chamber. You sneak in. It's small, circular, lit only by alabaster bowls of blue fire. The priestess chants, and the women, barefoot now, circle slowly, hands linked. Each one wears a symbol of her lineage: scarabs, lotus blossoms, falcon feathers. They're not praying. They're reminding the gods who they are. Because when the pharaoh dies, and one day he will, the gods won't choose the next ruler based on charisma. They'll choose based on ritual memory, and the women here are keeping that memory alive. Suddenly, silence falls. The great wife steps forward, unfastens her necklace, and lays it on the altar. The others bow, not to her, but to what she represents: continuity, authority, legacy. And yet, beneath all of it, you sense the fear. Because if the wrong child rises, everything crumbles. As you leave, you hear one last whisper. He was never meant to marry her, but the omens were clear. You want to ask, which omens? But you already know the answer, all of them, and none. Because when gods and bloodlines mix, truth becomes negotiable. And history? Well, history is what the survivors agree on. The moon is high and bloated, like a pearl dropped in ink when you step outside the women's quarters. The palace is quieter now, less like a storm, more like the pause before another. You move with the stillness, following the flickering trail of oil lamps that line the causeway down to the necropolis. Tonight is not for feasting. Tonight is for remembering. At the end of the causeway, beyond the garden of sacred papyrus, stands a small, square temple, carved straight into the hillside. This is the house of millions of years, one of many tomb complexes in waiting commissioned, while the pharaoh still breathes. Yes, still breathes. Because in Egypt, the dead aren't the only ones who need tombs. The living build their tombs in advance, sometimes decades early. Think of it as an eternal Airbnb, but one you really can't cancel. You enter through a narrow stone arch where the air tightens immediately. The walls close in, the paintings begin, and they are breathtaking. Scenes of the afterlife, in color so vivid it feels wet. Ra's solar boat sailing across the heavens, the pharaoh bowing before Osiris, crocodiles with crowns, eyes that watch you as you walk. A guard nods as you pass. He's half asleep, leaning on a spear. You doubt he understands half the symbols surrounding him, but he respects them. Fear and faith blur down here. You descend further, following the sloped hallway deeper into the earth. A scribe walks ahead, chanting softly, unrolling a scroll as he moves. It's a map, a spiritual GPS for the afterlife, left at the serpent's mouth, right at the cave of knives. Duck under the flaming doorway. Historians still debate how literally these routes were believed, but down here, in the inked shadows of eternity, everything feels literal. You arrive in a chamber so still, you feel your heartbeat echo off the walls. The ceiling is painted with constellations, each star positioned exactly. No Photoshop, just ladders and genius. A priest lights a brazier. The smoke curls upward, as if trying to rejoin the sky. And then he arrives, the pharaoh, not in gold, not in crown, but in linen robes and bare feet. He walks with no escort, no fanfare, just him. You feel the temperature shift, not because of mysticism, but because power carries its own weather system. He stands before a false door carved into the tomb wall, symbolic, yet solid. No hinges, no key, but it opens anyway, for the spirit. He places his hand flat on the stone and whispers a name. Not his own, his father's. The air changes again. You realize this is a remembrance rite, a rare private thing, not for politics, not for show, just for continuity. He kneels, a pharaoh kneeling. You didn't know they could. And then he speaks, not in decrees, but in fragments. You said I was too quiet, too soft. Pause. But I kept the land whole. Pause. I built the canal. You never did. Long silence. I wonder if you'd be proud or relieved that it's over. You stand frozen, not out of respect, out of awe. Because in this one moment, the divine mask slips. Not off, just askew, enough to see the sun underneath. When he rises, his face is unreadable again. The performance returns, but something stays with you. A tremor in the way he touches the door one last time. Gently, almost lovingly. He turns to leave. You follow, slowly. Back in the corridor, another priest waits. He carries a tray. On it, a scroll, a stylus, and a small bottle of ink mixed with ground obsidian. The pharaoh pauses, takes the stylus, signs the scroll. You peek, it's a decree. The start of construction on a new tomb, his own. The priest bows, vanishes into the dark. You realize what just happened. The pharaoh chose where he'll be buried, not because he's dying, though maybe he is, a little, every day, but because a god must choreograph his own disappearance. And then, oddly, he laughs, just once, quietly. Not too close to the river, he says aloud to no one. I'd rather not flood in the afterlife. You almost smile. He turns to you then. Yes, you, and says, you think it's strange, don't you? You don't answer, but you do. And he knows. He gestures toward the painted wall behind him, a scene of his own afterlife, freshly drawn. He stands with Ra, bow in hand, boat beneath his feet. It's not about what happens after we die, he says. It's about making sure we never really do. Then he walks away, footsteps silent. You remain behind, staring at the wall, at the pharaoh sailing forever on inked waves, at the moonlight touching the edge of the stone, at the quiet truth of this place. In Egypt, death is just a long, elaborate performance. But the audience? The audience watches for eternity. It's morning again, but this time, the light is different. Harsher, like the gods woke up in a mood. You step into the palace courtyard and feel the tension before you see it. Birds are quiet. Servants move quicker. Guards double-check their belts. Something is coming. And that something is foreign. The gates swing open with a groan that echoes too loudly. A caravan enters, dusty and deliberate, flanked by soldiers in unfamiliar armor. Their helmets are bronze, shaped like horns. Their robes are dyed in impossible colors, deep sea greens and crushed berry reds. Behind them, camels, chariots, and crates stacked with gifts, or bribes, depending on who you ask. You're witnessing the arrival of a foreign delegation. This isn't a visit. It's a chess move. You follow the procession through the corridor of judgment, past guards who don't blink. One chews nervously on the inside of his lip. Another grips his spear tighter than necessary. They've seen enough of these to know. Peace talks are just war with nicer outfits. The foreign leader dismounts. He's broad-shouldered, sun-scarred, with a jaw that looks like it's been carved by resentment. His name is unpronounceable, but his message is clear. We know your borders are thin. The pharaoh enters the chamber last, alone, No crown, just linen. But make no mistake, he's the sun in this room. Everyone else revolves. He says nothing at first, just walks the perimeter slowly, making eye contact with each visitor. Not hostile, not even cold, just calculating, like he's wondering who bleeds easiest. Eventually, the high priest introduces the guests with ceremonial pomp. A servant translates. Another hands over a scroll bearing the insignia of a foreign god, half lion, half thundercloud. The pharaoh takes it, reads, doesn't react, then hands it to a scribe with a bored flick. "Their offerings?" he asks, finally. The crates are opened. Inside, copper tools, cedar wood, lapis lazuli, incense from the southern deserts, and, curiously, a live leopard drugged and chained. The crowd murmurs. One official whispers, "That's a sign of alliance." Another replies, "Or a warning." The pharaoh raises a brow. "Does it bite?" The room chuckles. Reluctantly, he continues, "Tell them we accept the gifts, but not the threat." The translator stutters. The foreign leader's expression tightens. He bows, deeply, but not sincerely. Behind him, one of his guards sneezes. Everyone jumps. You realize how thin the piece is, like papyrus left out in the rain. Later, in the strategy hall, the pharaoh meets with his inner circle. Maps are unrolled, stones placed to represent troop positions. A general leans in, voice low. "They've tested our eastern border 3 times this year." "And our response?" the pharaoh asks. "Silence? Good." You blink. That's it? But then he adds, "Build a fortress at Jazer. Quietly, under a temple name. Say it's a shrine to Hathor. Invite pilgrims." You smile. That's not silence, that's bait. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians were master diplomats or passive aggressors in gold sandals. Today, you're seeing both. The discussion turns to espionage. A merchant has been caught with scrolls sewn into the hem of his robe, military diagrams, royal lineage charts, a map of the inner palace. "How was he found?" someone asks. "His donkey brayed too loud at the checkpoint." So that's how dynasties survive. Luck and livestock. The pharaoh orders the spy questioned. "Gently," he says. Then adds, "At first." Later that day, you visit the Hall of Scrolls, a massive chamber where the walls are covered in thousands of hieroglyphs. Not stories, not myths, letters, correspondence with kings across the known world. From Babylonia, "Your daughter is beautiful. May I borrow her?" From the Hittites, "We heard your crops failed. Shall we send grain or condolences?" From Crete, "We have no gods, but we like yours." Each message is archived. Each reply carefully inked in stylized diplomacy. One scribe shrugs as he files a scroll. "We send love in every direction." Sometimes they send knives back. The pharaoh walks through the hall in silence, then pauses beside one wall. There's a new carving being added, a treaty between Egypt and a kingdom you've never heard of. "It will fail," he says quietly. "Why sign it then?" you ask. He doesn't answer, but you know, because history only remembers the paper, not the blood it soaks up. That night, a banquet is held for the foreign guests. Musicians play lutes shaped like cranes. Dancers wear silver masks and move like wind over dunes. Everyone laughs too loud. Everyone drinks too slow. The food is lavish. Roasted duck, honeyed lotus root, figs stuffed with date paste. And yet, no one eats much. You sit beside a noble who mutters between sips of pomegranate wine. He should have them poisoned. Quietly. Say it was the leopard. You glance at the leopard. It's asleep, or pretending to be. By the end of the night, nothing is signed, but everything is decided. They leave at dawn, without the leopard. You don't ask why, but you know it wasn't a gift. It was a mirror. The leopard is gone, but the unease lingers. You wander through the palace in the wake of diplomacy, sensing that something underneath the smooth surface is beginning to churn. Egypt doesn't quake often, not visibly, but you feel it now. A tremor in the rituals, a flicker in the flame. The pharaoh is not in his chamber. He's in the hall of statues. It's a cold room despite the sun, not temperature, presence. The air feels still, like time itself has stopped to listen. Here, colossi of previous rulers loom overhead. Granite, limestone, alabaster, obsidian. Each face is perfect, idealized, carved to defy erosion and memory alike. You count them, 32, and each one is watching. The pharaoh stands before the newest one, his own, still unfinished. A sculptor works in silence at its base, chiseling the hem of a robe, the faint crease of a brow. He made the nose too small, the pharaoh says without turning. You blink. You didn't hear him enter. You never do. He steps closer to his own statue, brushing dust from its knee. Does this look like me? He asks, voice soft. You don't answer, because of course it doesn't. It looks like divinity, not like a man who wakes with headaches and politics and maybe, just maybe, doubts. Immortality, he murmurs. That's the goal, isn't it? Not to live forever, but to be remembered forever. Then he turns to you. And what happens when memory fades? You want to respond? You do. But the silence is louder than your thoughts. Later, you follow him to the temple of Thoth, the god of writing, wisdom, and questionable bird-head fashion. The walls are coated in hieroglyphic spells. Every inch speaks. Every symbol hums with the weight of repetition. A priest greets the pharaoh with a scroll. This came from the Delta. He opens it, reads. His brow tightens. A rebellion, not a big one, not yet. A fishing village refusing tribute. A local noble inciting unrest. It could be crushed in a day, or become a year-long scar. The pharaoh sighs. Then, very quietly, says, "Send grain," and scribes. Grain to feed, scribes to watch. You nod. That's how Egypt rules. Not with blades first, but with ink and wheat. Historians still argue whether this approach was genius or cowardice. But Egypt's longevity speaks for itself. You step outside and find a scribe leaning against a column, sketching. What are you drawing? You ask. His ears, he replies. Why? So they'll hear in the afterlife? You tilt your head. Don't ears come with the body? He shrugs. Better safe than sorry. You love the logic. Death prep with extra warranty. Back in the throne room, a council is forming. Advisors, generals, temple elites, royal architects. The pharaoh enters last, always. The room stills. The vizier clears his throat. We have begun work on the new tomb, as ordered. The pharaoh nods. But, the vizier adds, there are obstacles. What kind? The room tenses. One architect says, flooding. The bedrock at Abydos cracked after the last tremor. Another adds, and labor is short. The seasonal farmers are still harvesting. The pharaoh listens, silent. His thumb brushes his chin, his version of pacing. Then move the site, he says. To where? West of Thebes. A sharp breath, that's sacred ground. You'll displace the priests of Hathor, someone warns. Then let them bless the move, he replies. Tell them the gods spoke. But did they? The vizier asks, too bold, too fast. The pharaoh meets his eyes. They will, And just like that, it's decided. You leave with the architects as they shuffle scrolls and murmur curses. One mutters, "We'll never finish it before the flood season." Another, "He knows something we don't." You trail them toward the planning chamber. On the wall, a new sketch, floor plans for the tomb-to-be. Corridors, false doors, traps, secret chambers. Why traps, you ask? To keep out the living, the lead architect replies. You pause. But isn't it meant to protect the dead? He looks at you. Same thing. That night, the stars return. Same constellations. Same stories. You lie in the garden near the sacred pool where lotuses bloom under moonlight. The frogs sing, uncaring. The pharaoh walks past you, barefoot, alone. He doesn't notice you. Or maybe he does. He kneels by the pool and stares into his reflection. You approach quietly. "Do you believe in the afterlife?" you ask. He doesn't answer. Then, "I believe in preparation." You both sit in silence, watching his face ripple with every tiny wave. You want to ask, "Are you afraid?" But that would be cruel, because gods don't get to be afraid. And men pretending to be gods, they're too tired to admit it. The next morning, you awaken to noise, sharp, metallic, urgent. Somewhere near the palace gates, soldiers drill in formation. Spears clack, shields thump. Voices bark commands that echo off the sandstone walls. Egypt doesn't go to war often. But when it does, it likes to rehearse. You head toward the training ground, where dozens of young men move like a single organism. Sweat gleams on their backs, their movements precise, violent, beautiful in a way that's difficult to explain. Their commander, a woman in bronze armor, surveys them with one hand on her hip and the other on her whip. Yes, a woman. Egypt doesn't always care where power comes from, as long as it gets things done. She turns as you approach, one eyebrow cocked. "Here to fight?" she asks. You shake your head. "Shame," she says. "You'd make a good distraction." She means it as a joke. You think. Nearby, a royal boy, barely 15, trains with wooded swords. His tutor circles him like a vulture, barking instructions in between sips of date wine. "Again, parry! Step left! Stop blinking!" The boy fumbles. Tries again. Sweats harder. He's not bad, but he's not ready either. "Is he one of the heirs?" you whisper. The commander doesn't answer directly, just says, "He'll need to be." Back at the palace, the pharaoh watches from a shaded balcony. His gaze is sharp, assessing. He's not watching the technique. He's watching the hesitation. The future has no use for hesitant gods. Later, you follow the boy to the scribal chamber, where his day continues. He swaps sword for stylus. The instructor drills him in poetry, astronomy, law, and ritual etiquette. "Write the names of your ancestors," the man demands. The boy does. "Now write the names of your enemies." The boy hesitates. And there it is again. Hesitation. You glance at the scroll. He's written, "None yet." You can't help but smile. Give it time, kid. In the adjacent chamber, you find another youth. This one older, more polished, correcting mistakes on a diplomatic letter. His handwriting is flawless. His eyes, less so. Jaded already. He looks up. "You're watching us." You nod. "Do you know which one of us it'll be?" he asks. "No. Neither do we." That night, the pharaoh meets with his astrologers. They unfold sky maps, charting alignments and eclipses, tracking divine signals like accountants tracking tax debts. One points to a constellation. The crook aligns with the falcon in 4 days. And? The pharaoh asks. "It's auspicious." For naming, the pharaoh nods. It's time. A public announcement is planned. You trail behind the scribes as they carve proclamations into limestone. His Majesty, Light of Ra, will name his divine successor at the Temple of Karnak. The letters are thick, deep, meant to last longer than memory. In the temple courtyard, preparations begin. Musicians rehearse the hymn of inheritance. Dancers mark the space for the ceremonial steps. Priests debate over which god will be honored first in the opening rite. Arguments break out. Ptah should lead. He is the god of craftsmen. No, Thoth, this is about wisdom. Osiris, death and rebirth. You almost want to suggest just flipping a coin. But then one priest mutters, "Whichever god we choose, we must be careful. The people will read it as a sign." And there it is again. Everything is a message. That night, the pharaoh walks the hall alone. You shadow him quietly, his sandals barely whispering against the floor. He pauses before a small shrine, one not meant for display, a god of the old order, not forgotten, just less fashionable. He lights incense, bows. "Mistakes echo," he says aloud. You don't know if he means the god or himself. The next day, rumors spread like fire. He'll name the boy from the Western Queen. No, it'll be the nephew raised in Memphis. I heard he plans to say none of them. He'll live forever. He doesn't need an heir. That last one earns a sharp laugh from a palace servant. Have you seen him walk lately? The city buzzes with speculation. Markets thrum, priests rehearse, artists polish the gold-trimmed canopy that will frame the chosen heir like a god incarnate. And in the middle of all of it, the pharaoh is silent. Not distant, not cold, just calm. Like a man watching a storm form and knowing exactly when to step out of the rain. He meets briefly with his sister. They don't embrace, they don't smile. They just speak softly in the garden where fig trees droop with overripe fruit. Will they accept him? She asks. They'll have to. And if they don't? A pause. They will, he says. But his hand tightens slightly on the stone bench. As you leave, she looks at you, not with malice, but with recognition. You'll be there, won't you? You nod, and she just says, watch carefully. You plan to. Because tomorrow, a boy becomes divine, or he doesn't. And either way, history will pretend it was always inevitable. The sun rises sharp and blinding on the day of the naming. It's not gentle. It doesn't warm. It judges. Even the birds seem to hush, their calls swallowed by the anticipation that presses against the palace walls. You make your way through crowds gathering like slow tides around the Temple of Karnak. Everyone is here. Nobles in linen robes scented with myrrh, priests with shaved heads and unreadable expressions, commoners with dust on their feet, faces tilted skyward, soldiers with arms crossed, pretending they're not curious. Because today, the divine will speak through flesh. The Temple of Karnak is not one building. It's a universe made of stone. You pass through courtyards the size of fields, under pylons carved with battles won and gods appeased. The hypostyle hall looms ahead, its forest of columns taller than ships, thicker than judgment. Inside, shadows dance with gold, and there he is, the pharaoh, dressed not in splendor, but in white, pure linen, no crown, no sword, just a crook and flail crossed over his chest, symbols of rule, but also of burden. He ascends the dais, slowly, one deliberate step at a time. The hush is absolute. Even the breeze holds its breath. You scan the crowd and see them, the candidates. The boy from the Western Queen, his jaw clenched too tight. The Memphis nephew, cool, expressionless. The girl in the back, yes, a girl, though no one will say her name out loud. Not yet. The pharaoh raises his hand. A priest begins the ritual, calling on the gods, invoking ancestors, praising the lineage like it's the longest poem ever written. You zone out briefly during the middle stanza about a crocodile who wore lapis sandals. When you refocus, the pharaoh is speaking. He starts with a story, a simple one, about a flood season when the Nile rose too fast and his people panicked. Crops drowned, fields vanished. Fear spread faster than water. I was 15, he says. No crown, no advisors, just a boy watching his father pray for a miracle. A pause. I found a basket in the reeds, carried it to the temple, offered it with nothing inside. The priest told me that the act meant more than the contents. He turns to the crowd. Rulership is not about control, it's about presence. Another pause. I will not rule forever. You hear gasps, not dramatic ones, quiet ones, resigned ones. He continues. Today, I name the one who will carry this burden. Not because I love him most, not because he is strongest, but because he has already begun to carry it without being asked. He gestures. The boy from the Western Queen steps forward. There's a flicker across the crowd, recognition mixed with disappointment. You glance around. The Memphis nephew exhales sharply. The girl doesn't move, doesn't blink, just knows. The pharaoh takes a small ring from around his neck. It's simple, bronze, etched with an ankh. He places it in the boy's hand. This is not power, he says. It's responsibility. May it weigh more heavily than any crown. And that's it. No fanfare, no sky-splitting thunder, just silence and a soft breeze that returns as if released from a promise. You expect applause, but there is none. Instead, a low chant begins, wordless, just voices rising and falling like waves. You feel it in your ribs. The boy bows, and for a moment, he looks less like a child and more like stone shaped into something inevitable. Later, in the palace, you hear the reactions. Some support it. He's wise beyond his age. Some don't. Too soft, too foreign. One priest says, it doesn't matter. The gods have been shown the choice. If they reject it, we'll know soon enough. Yikes. You find the boy in the garden, staring into a pond. He holds the ring, turning it over in his palm. Does it get easier? He asks. You want to say yes, but you don't lie to pharaohs. So you say, it gets heavier. He nods, accepts it. Will they love me? You shake your head. They'll obey. That seems to satisfy him more than affection would have. That night, a private dinner is held. No guests, no performers, just the pharaoh, the boy, and a few close advisors. You watch from the shadows. The pharaoh places a single stone figurine on the table, a tiny lion carved from carnelian. My father gave this to me when he named me, he says. And you kept it? The boy asks. No, he replies. I threw it into the river. The boy blinks. Why? Because I didn't want to become him. You sit with that. So does the boy. Then he takes the lion and doesn't throw it. Later, when the palace sleeps, you pass by the pharaoh's chamber. You pause. Inside, you hear him breathing. Not peacefully, not deeply, just breathing. And you realize something strange. He didn't name a successor because he's dying. He named one so he could finally live. You wake to the smell of smoke, not fire. No crackle of burning wood. No heat licking at your door. This is older, thicker, a scent rooted in temples and bones. Incense, bitter and medicinal, laden with centuries. It curls through the corridors of the palace like a serpent seeking its tail, like a prophecy left unsaid. You rise before thought catches up with you, pulled forward by instinct alone, your feet already carrying you down stone halls painted with gods who neither speak nor sleep. You follow the scent until it leads you as you knew it would, to the heart of the palace, the inner sanctum where the high priest of Sekhmet is performing his cleansing rites. Smoke coils around him like silk, veiling his face in shifting gray. The pharaoh is ill, not visibly, not dramatically. There are no proclamations, no guards running for physicians in the night, no cries in the courtyard, no sudden closing of gates. But the sickness is there, slow and certain, enough that everyone pretends not to see it, enough that the silence has grown teeth. The physicians speak in riddles, in euphemisms wrapped in politeness like linen around a corpse. His energy is disrupted. He has been overexposed to divine heat. He carries the weight of both worlds. You nod. You are expected to nod. But you see the truth in the way he moves now. Slower, stiffer. A man pacing himself toward an end he already accepts. The way he reaches with his left hand for his wine because the right hand trembles. The way his words are fewer, but heavier. Each syllable carried across the air like something fragile. It is not death, not yet, but it is whispering. And Egypt listens. The palace shifts in rhythm, subtle but certain. Servants move quieter, guards stand straighter. Courtiers wear white more often, as if in rehearsal. The boy heir receives visitors now. His youth is still visible, but so is the weight pressing down upon it. He listens more than he speaks, already wiser than many who taught him. You watch him receive an envoy from the Nubian border, a man weathered by sun and river, bearing gifts of carved ivory and questions masked as flattery. The boy asks not of tribute, but of rainfall, of trade, of how the villagers feel, not just what they need. Later, you overhear a courtier sneer, too soft-hearted. Another answers, quieter, so was Horemheb. And he lasted 2 decades. Historians will argue for centuries about Horemheb, general, king, usurper, reformer. But they will agree on this. He was ready. And this boy, God's help him, might be too. You walk through the royal gardens, where workers quietly raise a small structure between the date palms. Not grand, not meant to last. Cedar and linen. A retreat tent, they call it. A place for healing, they say. But everyone knows. It is the preparation chamber. A place where pharaohs speak with gods before they go to meet them. Inside, the priests arrange the ritual objects with careful reverence. Gold sandals for the journey, a sacred staff, a necklace of turquoise beads, crushed and rethreaded so often it seems held together by memory alone. A miniature boat carved from pale sycamore, too small to float, too sacred to burn. You touch it. It is light, fragile, like the future, like the breath of a man who is no longer certain he will wake tomorrow. Beyond the palace, whispers crawl like ivy through the streets. Some say the pharaoh has been cursed. Others claim poison. A woman swears she saw Anubis himself walking beside him in a dream. Another whispers, he is shedding his skin. The new god is waiting beneath. People speak nonsense when they are afraid, but beneath their fear is a kind of preparation. Egypt teaches its people to read the sky, the river, the wind. They know how to watch for endings. Even the markets change. Bakers shape loaves into tiny pyramids. Potters carve the pharaoh's cartouche into water jars. Children sing lullabies with new verses about the next morning sun. At night, the temple drums slow. Their beat sinks into the earth like footsteps softening into sand. In the library, you find a scribe bent over his scrolls, copying by candlelight. "What are you writing?" you ask. "The Book of Breathings," a funerary text, a manual for souls. "You think it's time?" you whisper. He does not look up. I think the wind already knows. You find the Pharaoh walking alone at dawn, his steps measured, deliberate, like a man counting, not for ritual, for memory, to remember the shape of each stone beneath his feet, everything in its place, he murmurs, as if to himself. You ask if he is afraid. He smiles, slow and tired. "I've already met death," he says. "I see him in the mirror every morning." He chuckles softly. Looks a bit like me, but more patient. You sit with him beside the pool where the lotus blooms refuse to close, despite the dim light. The sun breaks the horizon slowly, painting the palace roof in bronze and amber. He watches it as if to make sure it still remembers how. "You'll stay, won't you?" he asks. You nod. "I don't need a witness," he says. "I need a lantern." You do not understand. Not fully. But it sounds like permission. That afternoon, the boy heir kneels before the statue of Ma'at. The priestess anoints his brow with oil. Not as king. Not yet. As one who waits. As one who will be ready. He whispers something to the goddess. Something meant for no ears but hers. You cannot hear. You are not supposed to. That night, a feast is held. Not loud, not merry, not full of music and dance as it once would have been. Just a gathering. Just presence. Just a goodbye disguised as ritual. The Pharaoh sits among them, robe loose, face shadowed by candlelight. He drinks, laughs once or twice, but mostly he listens. To stories, to silence, to the sound of the world continuing without him. Later, overwhelmed, you step into the courtyard. The night air is cool against your skin. Above, the stars burn indifferent and eternal. You lie down on the cold stone, staring upward, and think, this kingdom is too large for one man, but he carried it anyway. And now he is laying it down, carefully, like a crown on a sleeping child. And the world turns, slow and inevitable. And Egypt prepares, as it always has, to remember. You wake before the sun, not because anyone has summoned you. No hand bangs on your door, no voice echoes down the hall, but because something inside you knows. A quiet pull, like gravity mixed with memory. A tug that moves beneath your ribs and calls you from sleep as surely as the tides answer the moon. The palace feels different this morning. Not hollow, not panicked, not even grieving. Just suspended, like breath held too long. Like something immense has shifted but not yet settled. You know before anyone speaks. The Pharaoh has died, not dramatically, not in spectacle, not in the open court, nor in battle, nor in some grand gesture beneath banners and sun. In sleep, they say, quietly, beneath linen and stars, in the retreat tent they had built for him beside the gardens, where no one watched but the gods. He left the way he ruled, deliberately, without apology, without spectacle, with the calm of someone who has known for years how this would end. The air tastes strange this morning, sharp, metallic, a tang like copper mixed with cedar and heat. It settles at the back of your throat, like unshed tears. You move through the corridors by instinct more than reason, drawn toward the central hall, where the sacred mourners have begun their keening. It is not a sound made for ears, not a human cry, something older than grief, something structured, ritualized, shaped by centuries of repetition, until sorrow has its own rhythm, rising and falling like the Nile in flood. The court gathers in white linen, heads bowed beneath the weight of the moment. No wailing yet, no collapse. That comes later. For now, there is work. For in Egypt, death is not chaos. It is not rupture. It is process, procedure, a machine older than any of them, well-oiled by generations. Already the embalmers prepare. Already the priests move through corridors with bundles of cloth and vials of oil. Already the death scrolls are unfurled, the hymns rehearsed, the torches trimmed. Already things are being written, documented, weighed. You are not permitted into the inner chamber where the work begins, but you linger near the curtain. You listen. What you hear is not grief. It is precision. Metal tools clinking, ritual, words spoken, steady and low. A saw, perhaps, but not one meant for wood. Through the nose, someone whispers. The brain. You try not to imagine it. You fail. You know what comes next. The stomach, the liver, the lungs, the intestines. All drawn out carefully, cleaned, preserved, placed in jars of alabaster and clay. Hapi for the lungs, Imseti for the liver, Duamutef for the stomach, Kebesinuef for the intestines. 4 jars, 4 gods, 4 guardians for what the body cannot carry into the West. They will leave the heart, perhaps, unless they do not. Historians argue still whether the heart was always kept or whether sometimes it was replaced with a stone scarab inscribed with spells to stand in for the conscience of a man who would no longer answer for himself. A fail-safe in case the heart failed the weighing. You think, even in death, no one fully trusts the original paperwork. Later, the priests anoint the body with sacred oils, cedar, cinnamon, palm resin, the fat of bulls. The scent saturates the air until it feels like something you wear on your skin. Sweet, rancid, eternal. Then comes the wrapping, layer after layer after layer of linen, hundreds of yards. Between the folds, they press amulets, small protections for the great journey ahead. A scarab for rebirth, the Wadjet eye for protection, a golden tongue shaped tiny and thin to ensure he may speak clearly in the afterlife. Someone murmurs beside you, half reciting, half praying. He will recite the 42 negative confessions. I have not stolen. I have not lied. I have not polluted the waters. 42 ways to prove a life was no mistake. By midday, the sarcophagus waits. Black granite, heavy as memory, carved deep with spells older than kingdoms. Inside, a mask of gold, polished to perfection. Not the face he wore, the face he earned. You watch as it is lowered over his linen-wrapped head. A priest weeps, not from sorrow, but from the weight of tradition carried to its conclusion. This priest has embalmed 3 kings. He knows when it is done correctly. The next day, the procession begins. You stand along the causeway as the cortege moves, not fast, not dramatic, just steady, as it should be, as Egypt always is. Priests chant in tongues older than any living listener. Soldiers march, columns tight and silent. Commoners throw lotus flowers, papyrus blossoms, blue water lilies. Children watch with wide eyes and do not speak. The coffin rides a ceremonial boat pulled by oxen. Behind it walks the boy heir, now crowned but not yet ruling. His face unreadable, not stoic, not cold, simply prepared. They cross the river toward the west, always west, for Egypt keeps its dead beneath sunsets. The tomb waits, hidden in cliffs behind false trails and carved curses. You know its design already. You saw the blueprints, traced the passages. You remember the Pharaoh himself watching the workers as they dug it. back when his beard was still black. The final rites unfold. The opening of the mouth ceremony, ancient, incomprehensible, vital. Ritual tools tap upon the dead's mouth, his ears, his eyes, that he may eat, that he may speak, that he may see and breathe and defend himself in the lands beyond. Even dead, a pharaoh requires full functionality. At the tomb's threshold, offerings are laid: bread, onions, beer, goose roasted with honey. Not for gods, for him. Because in Egypt, death is not an end. It is management, continuity, an arrangement, renewed. At last, the tomb is sealed. Not with locks, with spells. Some true, some theater. It matters little. Words shape reality. Let no foot enter unless it walks in truth. May vultures gnaw the bones of thieves. You step back as the final stone slides into place with a sound like thunder under earth. It is finished, but not truly. Even now you feel him. Not as ghost, not as shadow, not lingering, not restless. Just present, beneath stone, beneath skin, in the hush between footsteps, in the weight of his statue's gaze, in the way the boy king speaks that night before the court. Calm, clear, without a script. We do not say goodbye, he tells the people. We say he goes ahead. And perhaps that is true. Perhaps pharaohs do not die. Perhaps they merely move into the walls, and Egypt, as ever, endures. The tomb is sealed. The dust has settled. The stones are in place. The paint beginning to fade beneath the slow hands of time. The chants are over. The priests have withdrawn. But in Egypt, death is never truly done. You begin to notice the aftershocks, not grief, not mourning, not the ache of loss that gnaws at those who live without answers. Number this as a quieter, more insidious ripple. Not sadness, logistics, politics, the subtle quake of power adjusting its weight, like a crocodile turning in deep water. Death is not a silence here. It's a tide. And when that tide brushes against power, it doesn't whisper, it slaps. First come the tribute adjustments. Every province sends more than asked, more than owed. Not from mourning, not from reverence, from calculation, from spectacle. Look at us, they say, with crates of linen, mountains of grain, strings of incense heavy enough to choke the gods themselves. See how loyal we are. See how well we understand how to behave when a god dies. Cattle are herded to the capital in numbers too large to graze. Barley floods the storehouses until the scribes cannot keep up. The governor of far-off Dendera sends a lion cub, sleek and golden, with a collar that reads in careful script, "For the next one." You hope it's a joke. It isn't. Then come the tomb builders. Not the living ones, the others, the robbers. You hear whispers in the markets beyond Thebes. You walk the stalls where spices, oils, and rumors are traded like silver. One man boasts of a tunnel. Forgotten, secret, straight to the pharaoh's gold. Another claims the tomb holds a chariot made entirely of gold. Solid gold? Someone asks. The man shrugs. Number hollow, but lined with lapis, the blue deep enough to drown in. A third man only says, "I saw the mask. I still hear it breathing." You leave before they notice you're not here to buy. In a tavern tucked between alleys, a scribe sits drunk beneath flickering lamplight. His ink-stained fingers clutch at his wine as though it might steady him. He left instructions. He slurs, eyes unfocused. Changed the tomb's layout 3 times. For secrecy? Someone asks. For confusion, the scribe laughs. In the end, even he didn't know which room held his bones. You hope he exaggerates. But You doubt it. This is Egypt. Confusion is its own form of protection. Back in the palace, the new pharaoh sits on the throne. A boy, really? Barely old enough to grow a proper beard. His posture is not yet easy, his words not yet heavy with certainty. But he is there, breathing, enduring, wearing the crown that weighs more than any headdress should. From the gallery above the throne room, you watch him receive an envoy from the east. Robes of silk, beard oiled and curled, a gift of 2 white horses and a falcon in a bronze cage, its eyes sharper than its captors. The boy pharaoh listens, nods once, says clearly, without hesitation, "Tell your king, Egypt endures." And just like that, it does. Transitions are rarely clean. You know this. Egypt knows this. One day, a royal accountant vanishes. So does a scroll listing tomb inventories, artifacts, jewels, the layout of chambers beneath the sands. Coincidence? Perhaps. Perhaps not. Another day, a priest is dragged into the square, his crime loud on the guards' tongues. Selling sacred linen, he claimed, fabric that once wrapped the chest of the divine dead. But it is ordinary cloth. Threads pulled from a market loom, not a funerary rite. He is banished or killed. It's hard to tell. Egypt erases its embarrassments with quiet efficiency. Historians will one day argue whether tomb robbing was rare or common. Some will point to official records, claiming security was airtight. Others will look at the cracked seals, the broken jars, the looted crypts, and wonder, was it theft or tradition? A final audit, a last tribute. Even sacred dead deserve to be accounted for. One dry afternoon, you return to the Valley of Kings, not in any official capacity, just pulled. The cliffs loom like broken teeth, jagged against a sky stretched thin with heat. The air here is different, tight, personal, like breath held too long. The wind moves as though it remembers things it ought not to speak of. You place a hand upon a sealed stone door, cool beneath your palm, solid, silent. You wonder what lies inside now. Gold, certainly. Jewels, perhaps a chariot if the drunkard's tale holds any truth, but also a body, wrapped in linen tighter than any truth. Eyes closed, mouth open, perhaps, as if still waiting to answer. The Book of the Dead says he must face 42 questions to pass into the next life. You imagine he faces 43. The last one, was it worth it? Back in the city, change creeps like ivy. Quiet, but relentless. Murals are updated. The boy's name appears alongside Ra. His titles grow fat with adjectives. His likeness is etched into statues, copied onto scrolls, whispered into prayers. The old pharaoh is not erased, not yet, but shifted, slipped sideways into the slow, comfortable embrace of myth. A child asks his mother, "Was he real?" She answers, "He was the son." The boy laughs, "I don't remember him." And there it is, the true death, not burial, forgetting. Later, in a craftsman's shop, you see a statue newly carved, the late pharaoh in flawless form, regal, serene, untouched by age or doubt. Not how he looked, the craftsman admits, how he should have looked. You nod, because that's the point. The dead do not need truth. They need shape. They need something for the living to hold. That night, you walk the palace halls. They're quieter now. The boy king sits with his advisors. He listens. He speaks carefully. He laughs sometimes. He corrects errors without raising his voice. But sometimes, when he thinks no one watches, he touches the ring on his finger, the one given to him by the dead pharaoh, heavy with jade, heavy with expectation, heavy with the weight of eyes still watching from beneath stone. You know the burden of it, and you watch him carry it well. You pause at the Hall of Ancestors, before the statue you once saw being carved, the closed lips, the small nose, the eyes that do not blink. You stare into its face and think, he did it. He made it through. Not untouched, not unchanged, but remembered. And in Egypt, that is the goal. Not peace, not glory, memory. And you are part of that memory now. The story continues, the dust resettles, and Egypt endures. You wake to the same sun, the same Nile, the same prayers etched into the walls of temples centuries ago. And yet, something has shifted, subtly, softly, as if the sand itself, after years of restless wind, has finally decided where it wants to settle. The rhythm here is changing, though most cannot name it. Most walk the streets, light their lamps, offer their prayers, and feel nothing unusual. But you notice, the boy Pharaoh is no longer a boy. He carries himself differently now, less like someone wearing borrowed grandeur, and more like someone who's grown into his own skin. His steps are firm, but not arrogant. His words are measured, but no longer rehearsed. Confidence, yes, but not the kind worn as armor. The kind that comes naturally, like calluses or wisdom teeth. One morning you follow him as he oversees the restoration of the Temple of Khonsu, long battered by floods, neglect, and time's slow hunger. There are no grand pronouncements, no demands for golden altars or towering idols. Only simple instructions, stone rebalanced, offerings restored to proper order, a roof made sound so the sacred scrolls no longer drink rainwater, a temple not for show, but for survival. You hear a noble whisper behind a sleeve. He rules like he's building for ghosts. Perhaps that's true. Perhaps he is. Egypt, after all, lives not apart from its dead, but beside them. Every street is shadowed by a monument. Every home leans on stone laid down by hands long turned to dust. Every prayer whispers two names, one for the living, one for those who are gone. Even the scribes feel it. In the quiet archive hall, you find one pausing, brush hovering midair over a fresh scroll of royal names. He looks up at his colleague. Do we add the old pharaoh here? A shrug. Depends if we want them to remember. That same day, a foreign diplomat from the Aegean arrives. Blonde beard, terrible sandals, a jar of olive oil in one hand, a dagger inlaid with mother of pearl in the other. Gifts for the great son of Egypt, he says in halting Egyptian. The pharaoh accepts them with the calm grace expected of kings. A nod, a polite word of thanks, a measured smile. But when the foreigner leaves, he mutters under his breath, one day, they'll all call him a god. You laugh softly, not mocking, just amused, because yes, they might. Foreigners have always loved to turn what they do not understand into myth. Later, the pharaoh beckons you into a sealed room beneath the palace. Few ever enter. The air is cooler here, dense with the scent of parchment, limestone, ink. The walls are unfinished. Chalk sketches still cling where frescoes were never completed. A map of stars sprawls across one side, tangled lines noting orbits, angles, forgotten names of constellations. He shows you his collection, not treasure, but ideas, plans, designs scratched into plaster. One is a pyramid, sharp and precise. Too old-fashioned, he says, almost fondly. Another, a temple without walls, just pillars open to the wind. Too vulnerable. Finally, he gestures toward a simple figure, a statue with no name, no inscription. That one, he says, that's the one I want. You ask, a statue? He smiles. Not the statue, the idea, the memory, something they'll argue about 1,000 years from now. He laughs, soft and tired. Let them disagree. That's how you know you mattered. Some historians would later debate whether this pharaoh planned his legacy or simply lived long enough for it to crystallize around him. Some said he courted myth deliberately. Others believed he simply endured until time polished his memory into something brighter than truth. You think of the Hall of Ancestors, of the mask sealed beneath stone. You think, perhaps both are true. One night, beneath a moon pale as bone, the pharaoh leads a private procession across the river to the west bank. No fanfare, no mourning crowds, just torchlight, the soft chant of priests, and the steady shuffle of sandals on dust. They stop at a tomb already sealed in stone and silence. He lays a lotus blossom at its threshold and says nothing, because there's nothing left to say. Everything has already been said. Long after the others have departed, you linger alone. You stand before the stone door one last time, press your palm against the cool surface, and whisper into the hush. They remember you. The wind shifts as if in answer. You do not imagine it. A week later, a scholar from the north presents a device, newly invented, gleaming in polished brass, that measures star angles with greater precision than ever before. The pharaoh listens carefully. Use it on the tombs, he orders. The scholar blinks. Why? To ensure they still align with the stars. Our dead deserve good company. That's the thing about Egypt. Even science serves memory. Back at the palace, you overhear a young guard telling a story to a servant boy. They say the dead pharaoh never truly died. Oh? He walks the halls at night, straightening the crowns on statues, checking the offering bowls. Does he speak? Number Just nods, like he approves. You smile. You don't believe in ghosts. But approval? That's powerful. A few days later, wandering the streets, you pass children tossing ivory dice beneath faded awnings. An old woman sells amulets shaped like the pharaoh's death mask. For protection, she claims. For boldness. Someone asks, are they real? She shrugs. Feels like it. You buy one. Not because you believe, but because he would have found the question amusing. At sunset, you climb the steps of the temple once more. Below you, the city burns gold and crimson. The Nile gleams like a sword unsheathed beneath the sky. Somewhere beyond your sight, beneath stone and mountain, lies a man who tried to be a god. Or perhaps a god who understood too late he was merely a man. You sit. No hymns, no offerings, just the sound of wind brushing across stone and the soft echo of sandals as the new pharaoh passes by without a word. He does not need to speak. He knows you understand, and you do, because Egypt is not built of stone and sand alone. It is built of memory. And you? You belong to it now. You have long since stopped counting the moons. Months pass, years perhaps, but you do not know how many. Time here is not marked by calendars nor by proclamations, nor even by the grand festivals that once split the year into ceremonial pieces. Here, time blurs, not because you are weary, nor because life is dull, but because this land, this Egypt, was never truly meant to follow the rhythms of clocks. Here, the days flow into one another like ink into papyrus. Seasons slide past, not with fanfare, but with quiet persistence. The Nile rises, breathes out across the land, then retreats again as if drawing a slow, ancient breath. Again and again. Temples crumble by grains and by gusts. Paint peels from the faces of gods who once demanded incense and song. And yet, nothing ends. Nothing vanishes. One quiet morning, you find yourself drawn once more to the palace archives. The air smells, as it always does, of ink, of clay dust, of the faint bitterness of dried papyrus and the slow decay of centuries. Scrolls line the walls like slumbering snakes, each coil hiding within it the thoughts of the long dead. Some are written in hieratic, flowing like water through reeds. Others in demotic, stark and practical, like soldiers lined in formation. A few carry strange letters, Greek, still hesitant, still searching for a place among these older scripts. Egypt is no longer a sealed vessel. New winds blow in, bringing strangers with soft sandals and heavy coin. They purchase statues they cannot comprehend, whisper prayers they cannot pronounce to gods they barely respect. The priests smile anyway. Egypt is ancient. It knows how to survive the ignorance of foreigners. Your hand hovers over a scroll unlike the others. Not brittle with age, but marked with a seal you recognize at once, the personal emblem of the dead pharaoh. Carefully, reverently, you break it. You expect a decree, a final command to the living. But no, it is a story, written in his own hand, with ink that wavers slightly in places, as though written in moments of reflection rather than ceremony. The tale is simple. A fisherman, a crocodile, two old creatures, weathered by river and sun, conversing not of conquest nor glory, but simply of water, of seasons, of the strange patterns of existence. No lesson offered, no grand ending, just conversation. You read it twice. Carefully, you roll it closed and return it to its place. You smile. Even gods, you think, must one day sit down and tell themselves a story. Outside, laughter rises through the palace streets. Not mourning, but joy. The living pharaoh, 5 years now into his reign, has opened a new granary, dedicated fresh water pumps to feed the southern fields. The people cheer. Flowers scatter beneath the wheels of his chariot. A child clambers up, laughing, caught and set down gently by a guard who grins despite himself. Egypt continues to Egypt, and beneath it all, beneath the banners and the noise, the dead pharaoh's legacy still hums like a lyre string beneath calloused fingers. A new temple rises east of Thebes, not grand, not imposing. Modest columns, a single statue, not upright, stern, commanding as tradition demands, seated, relaxed, almost smiling. You visit the site beneath the baking sun. The artisan speaks with the humility of one who shapes stone into memory. Not for worship, he explains, for remembering. A pause, thoughtful. So they will know he was not always marble. Your hand brushes the statue's stone fingers, warm from the sun's touch. Not divinity, simply time. That afternoon, the current pharaoh debates with his architects. One plan calls for deeper canals, richer harvests. Another, for restoring a crumbling temple to honor gods already half forgotten. I cannot do both, he says. A vizier asks, what would your father have chosen? The pharaoh thinks, long, carefully. I will choose what he could not. And that, you realize, is the weight of legacy. Not imitation, not duty alone, but evolution. The living must reach where the dead could not. Evening finds you again wandering the halls of the library. A girl, barely 12, painstakingly copies passages from the Book of the Dead beneath the flickering light of an oil lamp. Her father lingers nearby, fingers worrying the hem of his tunic. Why teach her this so young? You ask. He answers simply, so she will not fear what waits. Egypt teaches thus. Knowledge is not merely power. It is armor against the inevitable. One night you pass the tomb again, not by obligation, but by quiet habit. The wind is soft, barely enough to stir the sand. Above, the stars arrange themselves like beads fallen from an old priestess's necklace. A cat perches atop the stone ledge, watching you with the slow, knowing gaze of something ancient and unhurried. And you think, if it ended now, if the Nile dried to dust, if the gods forgot their names, still, this would have mattered. Because someone lived believing eternity was worth carving from earth and sky. Someone wore the masks of power and understood them to be both lie and truth. Someone scratched their name into stone so the wind might have something to carry. You descend from the heights, back toward the city's glimmering lights, soft as fireflies trapped in amber. You are tired, not with the weight of sleep, but with the ache that longs for peace. Later, beneath cool linen sheets, as the scent of lotus drifts on the night air, you understand something more clearly than ever before. This journey is no longer memory, it is belonging. Because Egypt does not release those who wander its sands. It does not forget them. It simply lets them rest. And beneath it all, the river continues. The chants are over now. The torches lining the sacred causeway have died into blackened stubs. The oils have run dry. The priests are gone, robes fluttering in the wind like memory. Even the stars seem to have dimmed, just enough to let the darkness finally speak. And still, the silence hums. You're lying down now, not in the tomb, not in the palace, not in the shadow of any statue, but somewhere softer, somewhere quieter. The world around you has released its breath, and so have you. You were there when the crown grew too heavy for mortal shoulders. You were there when the boy became king, and when the god became memory. You listened, you watched, and now you rest. The journey is behind you, but its warmth is still with you. The scent of cedar still lingers faintly in the air. The image of the Pharaoh's golden mask, polished and stoic, floats just behind your closed eyelids. Not frightening, not stern, but still peaceful. Do you remember the river? How it moved like silk in moonlight? It's still moving. Always. It carried your footsteps alongside the procession of gods. It carved the spine of a kingdom. It bore the weight of centuries on its tide. And now, it sings just for you. A quiet rhythm, deep and ancient, lapping at the edges of sleep. You feel it now, what the old scribes meant when they said the soul travels beyond the stars. What the artisans carved into walls they knew they'd never see again. That we are not what we own, or wear, or rule. We are what is remembered. And you, dear dreamer, have remembered well. So don't hold on anymore. Let the linen wrap your limbs like river reeds. Let your breath match the pace of dust settling over a royal name. Let your thoughts dissolve like perfume in temple air. And if, in your dreams, you walk those corridors again, if you pass the throne, or the statue, or the tomb sealed tight, just smile. You've been there already. You've seen what most never will, and it changed you. You may not be royal, but you walked like one. You may not be carved into stone, but you are written somewhere in time. So, sleep now. Sleep like the desert sleeps after rain. Sleep like the gods sleep when no one is watching. Sleep like your name has already been whispered to the stars. Because it has.